Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and welcome to Hangout number 123. I've been kind of crazy right before the show. So all of you who are in the chat room, first I'm just going to say welcome and not go through everybody's names because I have so much to get to, but welcome everybody. And if you want to be in the chat room, please click the link below, join Patreon, and you can be part of the chat community and be at all my live shows. Although you can see all of my shows without joining Patreon because all of my shows are public. And please do like and subscribe to keep the channel going and to keep me doing more videos. Now, whoever's in the chat room, I moved my Christmas manger finally out because it's after the New Year's, finally got the crush out of here, packed it away, put everything back that was there before, all my books. And do you notice what's missing? Does anybody see what's missing? I'll see how good you are as detectives. What is missing from behind me? Does anybody know what normally is there? Somebody says I'm crazy. Well, that's true. No, my artwork is not normally behind me. I just had it there because I set it there. But when I started painting, I put them there because I had no place to put them. No. The elephant. Yes, I did used to have an elephant up here. I took the elephant down a long ways away. Nativity is gone. I packed that away. No, nobody's getting it. Right over here is normally my little name plaque. It says Criminal Profiler Pat Brown. And my wonderful patron, Christine, sent that to me quite a while ago. And I just absolutely love it. It's so cool. It's my name. And I put it right here that tells people who I am. And after I put everything in the other room to put the nativity scene up, then I took the nativity scene down, got everything and put it back, and it's missing. And I'm like, what the heck? I'm the only one who lives here. I have been going crazy. I'm looking in every nook and cranny. I'm looking in drawers. I'm seeing if it fell on the floor. I cannot figure it out. Have you had those things that just disappear and there's no good explanation for it? Because there's no reason why it wouldn't be with the things that you had taken off. So I'm losing my mind. So yeah, that's a big thing for me. I love that. I love that thing. It was a nice gift. And Christine, I'm going to find it. I will find it. It has to be in the house. I just think maybe the cleaning ladies, it fell and some of the cleaning ladies picked it up and just put it someplace clever, that I just haven't found, but drives me nuts. Yeah. Always blame the cleaners. Always blame somebody else. But it's nuts. I couldn't figure it out. But anyway, so that's why I'm kind of late. I'm like running around looking for things, and it's one of those irritating things. It drives me nuts. You can't find your phone. People do lose that. People lose their keys. Those are the usual things, but I can't imagine how this has been misplaced. It's not lost. Yeah, and I have great cleaning ladies, so they don't steal stuff. So, and why would they want my plaque? They don't watch my show at all, so they don't even know who I am. So, but anyway, let me get to some of the things I want to talk about. All right. Now, some of you may have seen that I did a video, which basically this. Gypsy Rose Blanchard. She is the girl who, she was basically imprisoned by her mother, and a mother who exhibited Munchausen syndrome by proxy, who claimed she had leukemia, claimed she was couldn't walk, claimed she had this and that. The doctors colluded essentially and did so many surgeries and things on her. And then the mother was a grifter and a con artist, so she managed to get like a free house and trips and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, at some point when Gypsy found out she was actually a legitimate adult, although her mother changed her birth certificate so she wouldn't realize that. When she figured it out, she tried to escape from home and it didn't work out well. So she hooked up, not with the guy on the right, but some guy she found on a website, and asked him to kill her mother, and he did. So mother died, her mother's dead. And the guy that killed her is in prison for life, and she got 10 years, and she just got out after 8. She is out. She's married to the guy on the right who was her prison. He dated her, quote, in prison. And then they got married in prison. And then she came out of prison, got in his car, and off they've gone. And that just happened. And so there's a bunch of Lifetime. I watched the entire Lifetime docuseries, and there's been lots of other stuff on Gypsy Rose Blanchard. And after watching the series, I wrote this open letter to Gypsy Rose Blanchard, where I talked about, as you're leaving prison, here's what I see happened to you in your past. Here's what I see you're dealing with now. And here's what I think you ought to look at for the future. My usual blunt self, but I also wanted people who were not Gypsy, who have been in abusive situations like that, or something maybe not as horrific, but terrible. I wanted them to hear what I had to say, and it's been very well received. And people think it was has a lot of good information for people, and so I'm happy I did it. But I've gotten a couple things from people which I thought were interesting. One I'm going to do another video on. One group of people thinks that Nick, the guy who stabbed her mother, was wrongly imprisoned for life, that it should have been Gypsy Rose for life, and he should have gotten a better deal because they're claiming he's autistic, and a folie à deux situation. He wouldn't have done this if he hadn't been in love with her and wanted to save her. And he's this nice guy who just is misunderstood. He's got autism. What are they trying to claim he has? And he just got the raw deal, and she got a good deal. So there's like this Nick fan club going on, and a lot of hatred toward Gypsy Rose Blanchard, because you're either on one side or the other, I guess. So I'm going to do a video on that because Nick is a solid psychopath. And that guy doesn't need to see that. He never needs to be out of that prison ever again. He is into rape and murder. He loved the concept of rape and murder. So he wasn't just doing it for her. He was doing it for himself. And if he were out, God knows what else this guy would do. Become a serial killer. Very likely. So I'm really amazed that he's got this fan club, and it's like, wow, And so I've been getting a lot of kind of vicious stuff about how dare you, Nick is a victim too, and Gypsy should have been in prison for life. So it's interesting to see people's attitudes on that. It's kind of fascinating. I think he should not have RC life in prison. I'm not fan clubbing. Gypsy did her time. Well, understand, he not only did he stab the mother to death, which a lot of us think quite well deserved it, but if you look at what he is about, he is a very sick psychopath. He misrepresented himself on a Christian website. He suckered her into thinking they were in some kind of relationship. The guy was into rape and murder. This is not about Gypsy conning him. He wasn't conned. He wanted to kill. He wanted to enjoy the thrill of killing. He was just a little disturbed that she didn't want him to rape her mother as well. This is a sick dude. This guy does not need to be out in society, regardless of all the other stuff around. What do you think of Gypsy or not? That guy doesn't need to be in society. It's a scary critter. Yes, I do, because he's that dangerous. Yes, I don't have any problem with him never, ever getting out of prison. Now, the second thing people will say, and I think this is a reasonable commentary, they listen to my my open letter to Gypsy. And as a profile, I'm pretty hardcore on, you do the murder, you do the time. I don't feel too sorry for you, because most of the time when you're a murderer, you are a psychopath. And so a lot of people say, hey, she's a psychopath too. Her mother, Dee Dee, is a psychopath, but she's also a psychopath. How do you not recognize that because you're a criminal profile? She's also a grifter. She's manipulating people. She's fooling people. She's loving the attention she's getting out in the world now, and from the television networks and the men and all this stuff. She's eating it up. She's just like her mother. Now, I understand that question in their minds, is she also, does she also suffer a personality disorder? And I say suffer. Does she have a personality disorder of narcissism or psychopathy? Now, I can't say yes or no because I really haven't been able to study her well enough for long enough to come to a conclusion. And the most difficult thing about it is that when a person has been imprisoned for 20 some years, and she was imprisoned, when she has been abused, when she has been manipulated day in and day out, pretty much like somebody who's been kidnapped. And she's suffering from such Stockholm Syndrome, where this is your whole world, and this is the person who controls it. And you do things to please the person who controls it. And if they teach you how to steal, you steal because you think it makes them happy. And then they're saying, isn't this great? And you're happy too. And if they con somebody and you get a free trip to Disney World because you can't walk, but you know you can walk, and mommy wants you to do that, you get in on the program. So a couple things will happen. As you become an adult, you may have a personality disorder that develops because you are in such a bizarre situation. It's not unusual that personality disorders run in families because of the upbringing each one gets. Her Dee Dee apparently her mother was a little questionable. And Dee Dee's father seemed to be kind of a pervert too, because I think he did molest. I believe he molested Gypsy. When she told the story about how her granddad touched her and took her in the back room and did stuff to her when she was like, I forgot, 6, 7. I question whether she was making up crap. Because, again, here you are. Maybe you're a grifter too. Maybe you're a liar. And then the grandfather comes on and I'm like, no, she told the truth on that one, because he started saying things that did not sound right. Like, oh no, she used to come and try to touch me and I had to tell her no so many times. I'm like, seriously? What? So I think Dee Dee grew up with some not so healthy parents. She became a psychopath early on. Then she raises she raises Gypsy. Is it possible Gypsy also could become a psychopath? Yes. Is it possible that it's because she's never been free? Just recently, she just got released. First time in her life, she has been free of a prison situation. Prison with mother, then prison for 8 years. I don't know how she's really going to do in the real world. We shall see as time goes on. But the fact that she participated in some of the things, the lies and grifting her mother did, doesn't necessarily mean that she too has that same personality disorder. A lot of things that we see, like, oh, somebody said, well, she's just sucking up all the attention. Well, everybody likes attention, everybody. And she's a person who only ever had her mother's attention, except on these other certain rare occasions. And then a couple guys' attention outside of, before she went to prison. Of course, she's going to want attention. She wants to be loved. She does. She wants to be liked. She wants to be important. That's everybody's issue. So just because she likes it doesn't mean that she's a psychopath. And just because Dee Dee wanted attention, but Dee Dee lied and manipulated and conned and abused to get the attention. I don't know that Gypsy is doing that. No, the TV networks roll in, Lifetime rolls in and says, oh, we want to make you we're gonna put you on camera. We're gonna let you tell your story. And half of the show was pretty good. It was a documentary style. And then they devolved into a really crappy reality show, which I hated. And I mentioned it in my letter to her. I'm like, the fact they're following around your husband when he was your fiance, they're following him around in the hotel room and in the car and going to the prison. That's a reality show. And there's going to have part 2, there's going to be another season. And so I think it's going to be all reality show. Now, will she participate? People, you don't have to have a personality disorder to want to participate in television. I have seen people in green rooms. Their child has been murdered, but when they're in the green room at Montel Williams in New York, they've been flown in. They have a limo pick them up and bring them to the studio. They're getting hair and makeup. They are giddy about being on national TV, because who gets to be on Montel Williams, generally speaking. And they're just so excited, even though they're going to talk about their murdered kid. Now, when they get on the show and Montel started talking to them, they broke down and fell apart because that brought them back to reality. But even people in those situations love attention, love the limelight, love TV, because that's just human nature. So am I surprised if Gypsy goes on to have her another season, if she gets lots of speaking engagements or whatever? That's not necessarily wrong. I caution her on people using her, abusing and using her in the television industry, because they are pretty much like Dee Dee. They don't care about the people they abuse. They use them for their own making money and fame of the network and their shows. I warn her about that. But sometimes people can use you, but you can return the use by doing something good with it. So let's say her fame does get her speaking engagements. Will she reach out to people and be helpful? If that's true, that's good. I don't know. And exactly what her psychology is at this point in time, because she's been in such a weird situation. I expect that she is delayed emotionally. She acts more like a 13 or 14-year-old in certain ways. She still has fantasy issues. She still doesn't understand real life. Does she ever lie? Well, maybe. She has learned how to lie. I mean, does she manipulate a little bit? Everybody does. But what kind of manipulation are we talking about here? And so I think they don't have evidence to put her in the Dee Dee category at this point. So I was willing, and I really am willing as a profiler to, I am, to step back and say, I don't know, because I don't have evidence. So I wanted to give this letter to Gypsy, because I see her coming out of prison and she's been through hell. I mean, you just rarely run into a situation where a person's been through that kind of thing. And now they're stepping out into the world. What will they do with that freedom? And we're going to find out. I don't know. And I don't know how many people are going to abuse her in the real world. I question her marriage. I question a guy who'd marry a girl in prison who isn't ready to get married. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's the nicest guy in the world. I hope so. There's so much, we don't know at this point. But the question is reasonable. Could she be a psychopath just like her mother? Possibly. But I'm not going to say absolutely. And that's what some people wanted me to say. Absolutely. Your profile, you should know she's a psychopath. No, I don't know that. I don't have evidence of that. I'm not going to go there before I have evidence of that. Sometimes I like to hold out that people who've been tortured and abused and victimized have some chance at a life in this world. I hope Gypsy has that chance. If it turns out she's just like a mummy, well, that's a whole nother day. So let me check some of your comments. Even with therapy, some things never go totally away. Absolutely. I mean, you're talking over 20 years of captivity by her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. 20 years. Now, it's interesting. In a sense, all children are captives of their parents. All children have to do what their parents say and have a level of Stockholm Syndrome. If I do this, mommy and daddy will love me. Is this not true? I mean, we all have levels of that. That's the way society works. I have 3 children. I'm sure they have stories, because I had levels of power and control, and I decided things for them. And I'm sure sometimes they did things just to please me or please their dad. So, we all, to some extent, all children are prisoners of their parents and have Stockholm Syndrome. However, when a parent knowingly harms their child, knowingly is destroying their child for their own reasons, for their own amusement, for their own thrills, that's where the line is crossed. I mean, life is not perfect. Nobody gets perfect parents. Nobody is a perfect parent. But then there's that line which you say, okay, you may be whatever you may be, but if you cross that line, it's not okay. Okay, it's not okay. Then now we got serious issues. You should be in prison, and that's why we have a thing called social services, which fails quite well. Jill says, what's the theory about maturity being stalled at age trauma was inflicted, the age she was forced to role play? There's a lot of theories. I think they're all theories. She was in such a peculiar situation, so peculiar. It's hard because there's not many kids who've been through that level of stuff that Dee Dee did to her over such a long period of time. A lot of Munchausen syndrome by proxy women just kill the babies and get it over with and get the good funeral and move on. Get another kid and kill that one. In this case, her whole thing was this one child. Now, we have seen other cases where a person just focuses, a mother or just focuses on one child, usually a mother, not a father, interesting enough. But that is a psychopathy, a behavior of psychopathic females, which they're able to do because of their situation in life. In other words, they're not so into jumping out of bushes and raping people, but you got this kid in your control and people have given you that power, and it's acceptable in society. You have that power, and then you can twist that power and you can get what you want. And so, yeah. So when a child is raised in that, every part of Gypsy's life wasn't awful. I mean, when her mother wrangled things like, going to a Disney World, getting to see famous people, getting the free house from Habitat for Humanity. I mean, I'm sure that was happy for Gypsy. Gypsy had happy moments in her life. Her mother could do nice things for her, buy her pretty princess outfits, give her cakes. So every moment with a psychopath is not bad, which is what the problem is. If every moment was bad, you would be you wouldn't be questioning yourself all the time. Like, maybe I shouldn't be so mean about my mother. But they're clever. This kind of people are very manipulative and clever. So it's like you go from heaven to hell, heaven to hell, heaven to hell all the time. So I don't know what point is she, as Gypsy, lost certain levels of maturity where she's been stumped, just things didn't move forward. When I looked at her in prison, she's very well spoken. Her book is very good. I liked it. She says she loves the dictionary, and she's got some great vocabulary, really nice. She puts together sentences very nicely. And then she's got these moments where she's just very childlike and where she's very teenagery and very giddy. And I think she's probably in her own evolution, more like 13 or 14. So she's got a lot of growth to do. And unfortunately, now she's she's married, and so I don't know. We'll see what happens with her, but it's a rough thing. Wait a minute, I got to check this, Michaela. I think it's incumbent on every parent to screw their child up as they were screwed as children. Oh my God. As they say, nobody gets training for being a parent, and it doesn't take much work to be a parent. As a matter of fact, it takes about 5 minutes of the backseat of a car. That's all it takes. And people have children who they're not prepared. Some of them don't want them. We all know this. We all know the drill. Sometimes I just think, wow, when we come into this world, we're talking about the good rolls of the dice and the bad rolls of the dice. I'm pretty sure that, getting the good rolls are pretty limited comparing to getting snake eyes. So it's sad, but yeah, she was never allowed to grow up. That's absolutely true. She wasn't. And so she's not there yet. And unfortunately, I think she should not have gotten married. I think she should have left the prison, maybe stay with her stepmother, who seemed fairly rational. Her father was there too, but fairly rational stepmother, and then grown from there, had some time to go to school, go get some job, do things that were normal people things. And then after 2 years or so, she wants to date the fellow. That's one thing, but she hasn't grown up yet. And that's one of the things I said, you're not really there yet. And, but could her mom be a psychopathic narcissist? Well, all psychopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are psychopaths. Her mom was a psychopath. Hands down, 100%. She's a psychopath. Let's see. I'm looking backwards a little bit. Oh, let's see here. Lex says, childhood trauma has a massive flow on effect into adulthood. Absolutely. Mental health and actual physical health, like a dramatically increased incidence of autoimmune issues that come in. All kinds of things. I mean, it takes, what a toll it takes on a person. I feel like, I grew up in a relatively good home. My parents were good people. I felt a little left out in my family, and I was the third child. I didn't really match so well with some of their lifestyles and interests. And I always felt a wee bit neglected, although they didn't really neglect me. They just, well, let's put it this way. If I went, I was a bowler, and I averaged, at 14 years old, I had 172 average. I was pretty darn good. My parents never once saw me bowl. They didn't show any interest in it. And at a certain point, I just sort of gave it up. And now I'm like, Now, is it because my parents simply they weren't bowlers? Maybe they just couldn't ratchet up the interest. Were they being bad parents? No. But could they have given me more support? Maybe. I got into karate, and they didn't show up for the karate exams either. But my sisters who skated and played organ, they showed up for that because both of them were into organ playing and skating. So sometimes it's just the interests that match. And when interests don't match, sometimes parents are a little bit, not so, and I don't know what you call it, energetic to be involved when they're like, don't care about that kind of thing. My parents are good parents. They didn't drink. They didn't do drugs. They stayed married till they were in their 90s. Nobody molested me. I was never beaten. My parents were decent parents. And looking back, I have a lot more appreciation for them than I did at the time I was a teenager. But I even felt as a teenager that I had somehow not gotten what I wanted to get. And I had never been abused. And I say neglected with quotes on. But I went on with life, and I struggled with certain things because my maturity was a little uneven, and my understanding of world was a little uneven and not so useful. And I struggled for quite a few years. So I'm imagining I had a good family home. We had money. Parents were nice people. I had no abuse. I can't write one of those tell-all books because nothing really to tell, except for these minor things, which I whine about. Because as a teenager, I wanted more appreciation for these things. I wanted more attention. Didn't get it in certain ways. But maybe that's what all parents were like back in the old 50s, 60s, and 70s. I don't know. But they were not quite as, cheering you on as they do today. But I didn't go through what Gypsy went through. You go through something like Gypsy went through, and that's a whole nother world. That's a whole nother nightmare. And anytime we have somebody's like a prisoner of war, things they go through are things we cannot imagine. When you think of people who are caught in a war zone and they're raped and tortured, and then eventually they come back to their families. Can we imagine what they come back to their families with? We're not in those situations. They're so horrific that the damage it does to the mind and body for years and years to come. Yeah, it's a tough one. So that's why I give Gypsy a bit of a break. I mean, I'm not absolutely sure what her situation is, but my God, the woman has never been free until the last couple of days, and I don't even know if she's free now. So that's why that's why I did so I'm going to do 2 more videos. I rarely do that many videos on a case, but I have another video I've already done, and on that particular video, I'm comparing. I'll let you see it when it comes out. And then I might do the one on Nick, because Nick is just like, he's a scary guy, and he shouldn't have a fan club. You can disagree with the sentencing or whatever, but that guy's scary as all get out. And that guy's a psychopath. And people are making all these excuses that, he wasn't. So I'm going to talk about folie à deux, and which I've done in 2 other videos. And I find it kind of a continuing thread that oftentimes a person who's more guilty is the person who commits the actual homicide and not the person who requests the homicide. Because a person who requests the homicide is the one who's theoretically suffering in this position, and the other person isn't suffering. And they're saying, here is a person who I can take advantage of because they are in this position and they have emotional problems and they can't function and they're begging for help, and I can manipulate them. I can use them to be able to do what I want to do. So sometimes I think that the actual perpetrator of the actual homicide is the one that is probably more psychopathic than the person who wanted the homicide to occur. But I'll get into all that later. All right. So what else do I want to talk about? All right. Other things. I want to mention this movie that came out because I find it really interesting. This is on Amazon Prime, and it's called Dahaad, and it is a Hindi movie. So the original language is in Hindi, and then you can get subtitles that make it in English. I think it's got eight shows for the season, and the reason it's so interesting is that generally speaking, I am not a big person who is into serial killer movies because I find them like, here we go again. There's some serial killer out there, and he does these ridiculous things like carving an X into every girl's chest, and he chases the profiler and all this nonsense. And he's brilliant beyond belief and blah, blah, blah. All right. However, this, I was totally fascinated during the whole show, and that's hard for me to have happen. So anyway, the guy on the left is a guy by the name of Mohan Kumar. And he's also known as, what is he known as? He's known as this Cyanide Mohan. Because remember, we've had some cases recently talking about cyanide poisoning, right? And here we have a serial killer who uses cyanide as his methodology. How unusual is this? So anyways, this guy by the name on the left is Mohan Kumar, and he's from Karnataka. And on the right is the actor playing his part, and his name is Vijay Verma, and he is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And take a look at him. He's a teacher, and he's a teacher of literature, of Hindi literature, and he does a lot of poetry. And the girls in the class are like falling for this guy because he's just so charming. And I have to say, I'm like, oh, I like that guy, not realizing that he was the serial killer, which comes, I'm not giving away too much because pretty quickly into the show, you realize that he is the serial killer. And I will tell you how this works. What's fascinating in the show is, now, I'm not saying everything in the show is based on absolute truth, okay? Because it is a fictionalized version of it. But it's really interesting to watch the way his mind works. It's just fascinating. And how one of the things they do, which is so brilliant in the show, is that when he commits his crimes and he tries to lure women in, he's very clever at the way he approaches them, right? And you think the first time you hear it, you're like, oh man, I'd go out with this dude. The way he's so humble and he's so friendly and he's so sweet, and you really like the guy. And then you realize when he meets the next girl, he says exactly the same words. So he's found the methodology that works. And I've pointed this out quite often with serial killers, that what they do is they test. So they'll say things like, hey, baby, you're hot. I want to have sex with you. And the woman's like, you're creepy. And she runs away. So he goes, well, that didn't work. So he tries something else. Hey, baby, you look really nice. I'd like to be with you. And now she doesn't run away as fast. So now he switches over to that one. And eventually what happens is some smarter serial killers learn, because they don't have the normal social mentality as other people, because they don't care about other people. They only care about what they want. But they learn, and they don't have the normal emotions, but they mimic emotions. So he's found this methodology that works, and it's so creepy to hear him do it over and over again. And you know it's coming, and you see the girls fall for it, and you're like, no, don't go with him. So anyway, let me tell you a little bit about the guy on the left, because this is the actual guy who is not nearly as cute as the guy on the right. So hey, I don't know if I'd fall for that guy, but anyway, his name was he was a psychopath and a professor. He was a professor a serial killer named Anand Swarnaker. So, wait a minute. Oh no, sorry, sorry. Let me redo this. Vijay Varma, the guy on the right, he's playing a psychopathic professor and serial killer, Anand Swarnaker. Sorry. The guy on the left is Mohan. All right. So, but here's the story. So, the real guy on the left is serial killer Mohan Kumar, also known as Cyanide Mohan. Cyanide Mohan is accused of murdering 20 women in Karnataka. Karnataka? I thought it was Karnataka. Okay, Karnataka, from 2003 to 2009. So this is what happens. Though the events in the series take place across Rajasthan, the killings by serial killer Mohan Kumar are mostly in Karnataka. But there's a lot of similarities in the show. The method that he used. Now, let me tell you about the method he used, this is what's so fascinating. So Mohan targeted young, unmarried women around the age of 20. He would approach these women, befriend them, and eventually ensnare them into a physical relationship. So this is where you see in the movie how the guy's just super friendly and really a nice guy. The guy you want to take home to mom. You know, he's like, oh my God, the perfect guy. You know, he would then he'd get them into a physical relationship. And a lot of times what he would focus on is women of the lowest caste who were having trouble being able to get married because the family couldn't afford to pay the dowry to get them married. So these girls were like kind of desperate to find someone. Here comes a guy who says, I'm not interested in dowry. I want to marry you. And he's like, okay, so meet me. He'd have them meet him in like a hotel. And then he said, next day we're going to get married. They would bring off some pretty sari so they can go get married the next day. He'd meet them in the hotel and they would have sex. Then he would say, oh, wow, you know, we didn't use a condom or my condom broke. I don't want you to, you know, get pregnant so early. I don't want you in trouble like this. So he would say he would go into like a pharmacy, come back out with some pills in the morning and say, this is a morning after pill. So if you just go into the bathroom, because you might get a little nauseous. So just take it into the bathroom, take it there, and then come back out and get in the car. He laced those pills with cyanide. So the women were on the way to get married, you know, get saris on. They would go into the bathroom, take the pill, and die in the bathroom. And then he'd just drive off. And then he also would rob them of their jewelry because they were bringing whatever they had because they were going to get married to this guy, right? So he went through a whole bunch of women with the same little charade all the time. And so if you watch this movie, and I'll show you it again, the name of it, so that you might check it out. It's called Dahaad. It's just really good. And it is on Amazon Prime, Dahaad. And I say I like it because there's zero violence in the movie. So you're not like, it's not the normal serial killer thing where they love to show the guy jumping out and stabbing and raping and all the horrible things. None of that. It's all done with a cyanide tablet. Very clever. And then when you watch the police trying to go after this guy, you see some of the things he does and the reason he keeps getting away with it and getting away from them. It's not absolutely. Now, not all of it is true in the fictionalized version, but it's really, I couldn't stop watching it. So if you want to watch a good serial killer film instead of one of these just violent pieces of crap with ridiculous stories, they're always chasing the profiler, watch Dahaad. I think you might find it really interesting. You'd have to like subtitles. So please like subtitles. Yeah, it was pretty quick. They never got out of the bathroom. Yeah, so you know, it was quite. Sounds like a good movie. It's actually a series. It's like 8. I mean, I couldn't stop watching it. So you know, I spent a lot of nights like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, okay, I gotta go to sleep. And I'm not really into serial killer movies because they annoy the crap out of me. But this one was fascinating. I mean, even if it wasn't exactly true, all of it was still fascinating. And sometimes I was totally surprised at where they went with it. And I'm like, that's really neat. That is so freaking neat. Yeah, check it out. Kez Chick says, I hate watching real violent shows. I don't watch them. I don't need that in my life. I mean, I can look at crime scene photos and see lots of blood. I can deal with that because that's my profession. But I have no desire to. I can't stand what I consider uh, essentially almost like a fake snuff film. I don't need to see a woman being raped and murdered. That makes me throw up. I'm like, I don't want to watch that. I don't think that's amusing. I don't want to see it from the killer's point of view, how much fun he's having. This is sick to me. I'm not going to watch that kind of crap. Slasher films, I hate them all. I think people who make slasher films are psychos themselves, because who the heck wants to make a film showing women being raped and murdered? Who does that? I have some opinions on a few people who make films like that, and they're not good opinions. Okay. What's the point? He doesn't hang around to. Okay. The reason he is not this serial killer. So not all serial killers are about the thrill of the actual murder. They are getting the thrill out of let me tell you what he gets the thrill out of. All right. First of all, he likes the game. To be able to, he kept going from one woman to the other, fool them into thinking he truly loves them and that he's going to marry them. And they're like, he gets a kick out of that game. And then they go away with him. He gets a hot night of sex with a virgin. And the next day, he kills her and takes all her stuff, and he makes money off of it. So his whole thing is very different. And one of the things I've noticed is that in different countries, the thrill of crime for serial killers can be different. And India has a lot of very different kinds of serial killers than I've seen in the United States. And this is also true for down in Brazil. It's also true for over in Germany. It's interesting. I'm not quite sure why that is, whether the culture develops some kind of things that just fascinate people within certain cultures. The methods they use, the weapons they use, the kind of thrill they get out of certain kinds of manipulation and whatever. But in this particular instance, the guy, I mean, he got 20 women. He fooled at least 20 women. Fooled 20 women to marry him, and he never married them. He got 20 virgins. They got their jewelry, even though there weren't wealthy girls. Still, a lot of girls, when they're going, some of these girls stole stuff from their own parents. So they were running away, so they stole their mother's gold. So he got some money out of it, and then they just went in the bathroom and died, and he just drove away. And he's like, I can do another one. It's like, wow. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. So, yeah. I don't know this one. Gave me nightmares never again. Yeah, don't watch things that make your life unpleasant. Really. That's not. Don't do that to yourself. Okay. Speaking of motive, somebody asked me to talk about the Doodler case, which I had never heard of. And it was this fellow, the Doodler. This happened in 1974 to 1975 in California. I think, let me find out what area it was in. Hold on a second. Let me find my Doodler dude. Doodler dude. Where's Mr. Doodler? Oh, here he is. He had an interesting methodology. And the question again is why? Now, this is a sketch of the guy. He had some living victims, so there was a pretty good idea this was the guy. As a matter of fact, he never was. The police believed they knew who it was, but the guys, those victims that were alive wouldn't testify in court, so they couldn't actually convict him or arrest him and convict him. And later on, they're still looking for this guy. Now this is their age progression, that they think he might be 63 to 69 and look like this at this point. I guess poor guy's lost his hair. But anyway, all right. So what about this guy and his motive? All right. He's an unidentified. Police think they know who it is. A serial killer believed responsible for the deaths of 6 to 16 murders. I think some of those murders are not to do with him because I looked at them. And 3 assaults. And these are the 3 assaults are the live people who had similar things to say and similar descriptions. So they brought this guy in. I'll tell you about that in a minute. 3 assaults of men in San Francisco, California between January 1974 and September 1975. The nickname was given to the perpetrator's habit of sketching his victims prior to stabbing them. So he was quite an artist, and he would like sit there and see somebody, and he like, one of these things where, you see on the boardwalk or someplace, on a beach boardwalk, and they draw your face really quickly and they go, look what I'm in. And they're like, ooh, that's really cool. Picture me. That's a very good seductive technique. And he met his victims in gay bars and nightclubs and restaurants. So all his victims were selected from places where gay men frequented. The suspect was described as a black man between 19 and 25 years of age, so quite young. He was about 6 foot tall with a slender build, so he's not a toughie. Several victims were stabbed in the front and back of their bodies in similar locations. There was this area near a beach area, and there was like some bathrooms there that were also used for sex trysts, and then there were just this whole area. They were dotted in slightly different places, but kind of killed in the same way. All the victims were white males. Police theorized that the victims all died after meeting with a suspect near the locations where their bodies were recovered. So he either met them in a bar and went those locations, which they're saying maybe not so, or he met them to go have sex in one of those bathrooms, or he said, we're going to go down to the beach and hang out, or he met them at the beach. Like, hey, look at this. You want to meet? You want to meet over there? That kind of thing. All right. But the interesting thing is these guys are fully clothed. So they were fully clothed, and they had self-defense wounds, and he stabbed them, and then did a lot of stabbing and cutting their neck, stabbing them quite a many a time. The second guy that was discovered, he had been seen at a club the previous day. He was employed as a female impersonator and a comedian. They suspected he was alive at the time he went to this lake area, possibly transporting himself to the area with the killer. So whether it was his vehicle or the killer's vehicle, I guess his vehicle wasn't there. So then there's another fellow, he's 31. He was a German American. His was more violent. He'd been slashed in the throat several times, body fully clothed. They thought he might have been a closeted gay man because he did have a family. And then there was another fellow, 52-year-old lawyer. He was also, but this guy was beaten to death with a rock and a branch, and I'm not so sure that had anything to do with it. Another fellow, 32 years old, had been found. He was stabbed like the other victims. It was believed his body had been moved approximately 20 feet because there were disturbances in the sand, because, again, this was a little beach area some of them were found in. He had been a nurse in the Navy at one point. And then the other fellow was Harold Goldberg. He was 66, and he was kind of weird because he was so much older, kind of inconsistent. But his was the only one. The underwear had been taken by the killer, and the pants were unzipped. But they believed he was the final victim of the killer, and he was known as John Doe for a long time. But they figured out who he was. Now, the police questioned a young man as a murder suspect in the case, but could not proceed with criminal charges because the 3 surviving victims did not want to out themselves by testifying against him in court. And we're talking about a long time ago. So there were certain men there who were not out as gay men. Some of them had families. Some of them, they just thought, we're not going to go to court. We don't want people to know we're gay. That wouldn't probably be so today, but it was definitely that way then. And so the problem is they got the guy in, and the suspect cooperated with police during his interview, but never admitted guilt for the murders and attacks. The officers stated they strongly believed that the man in question was responsible for the crimes, but he was never tried or convicted because of the survivors' refusals to appear in court. And there was apparently no DNA to work with. They were not raped. They were stabbed to death. So now they're saying that they're trying to use some DNA technology today. But I don't know if they got any DNA to work with. So they have that picture of him. So they theoretically know who he is, the one they think did it. But they don't have any connection that they can convict him with because the victims would not testify. And now the victims are pretty much dead because time has gone on. But now I'm going to ask you, what do you think the motive was? It's an interesting case because sometimes it's so clear on a motive. Now, remember, a serial killer is a psychopath. A psychopath does things for power and control and for a thrill. What do you think it was? You have this young black man. He's stabbed to death. A whole pile of young, mostly young, but one older, white gay men. He met them enough of them he met in gay clubs, but he didn't rape anybody. What do you think? It's interesting. What do you think was the motive on these crimes? I mean, outside of the fact he's a serial killer and likes killing, what was the motive? Let's see. I'm waiting for responses here. I'm seeing if anybody comes up with anything. If you're in the chat room, you see some of the fun things that I'm looking at, but I don't always put up everything somebody puts in the chat room because I know people are chatting with each other, not necessarily wanting this to be a part of the show. Okay, what's the thinking here? Okay, let's look at a couple of them. Sky Ricky says, "Is it a hate crime?" Well, sometimes because we see a racial difference. We see in this particular case, we have a black perpetrator and we have white victims. Is it a rape crime? Well, could it be? Yeah, it could be. But on the other hand, I don't know if that in that area, and this is where you have to start, this is where you have to say to yourself, if you're doing detective work, profiling, you have to say, well, first of all, what was the race of most of the people that were in the club at that time? Now, most of them happen to be white. Maybe the guy's just picking gay guys and they just happen to be white because that's where he lives and that's where they are. 2, maybe he just likes white guys. Maybe he's just attracted to white men. You know, we all are attracted to certain looks. We are. And just because we pick that look doesn't mean we were like pro something or anti something. When I married my husband, who was Jamaican, people actually said to me, "Is that because you don't like your own race?" I'm like, "Say what?" I'm like, "No, but was I attracted to people with darker skin?" Yes. To this day, that still remains true. It does. It remains true. I'm not, a blonde guy. No, I'm not saying I wouldn't marry a blonde guy or have a boyfriend for a blonde guy. I would. I mean, if I liked the guy and he's a really unique guy, yes, I would have him. I would be in a relationship with a guy who's paler than me. But physical attraction. I do like darker skin. I don't know what it is. It's like certain facial features. It's just something I like. And I look and I go, that guy's sexy. Whereas I could look at another woman is saying, that guy's so sexy. I'm like, eh. So we all have attractions to certain looks. I have an attraction to, one thing I realize is like, Stallone, Sly Stallone. I wasn't really attracted to Italian dudes, right? But he had this droopy thing. I can't remember, was that droopy eye, droopy mouth? I have a thing for that. I don't know what it is. And I've noticed that when I've been attracted to other actors, they have the exact same look. My favorite actor is Shah Rukh Khan. And I think one of the reasons when I looked at the serial killer movie, the guy doesn't exactly look like Shah Rukh Khan, but he has an expression that is very similar. And I'm like, ooh, there you go. What is it? I don't know. It's what governs us biologically, emotionally, whatever you want to call it. So this guy, maybe he just was attracted to white men. He just liked the way they looked. He was like, that did it for him. Or maybe they were the only people in the bar, or maybe he hated white people. See, this is the interesting thing when you're doing investigation. You got to be very careful because we don't actually know. We're not inside the mind of that person to actually know what their issue is. Because, it's funny because sometimes you literally, the person will say to another person, well, you killed that person because you hated them. And the person will, no, I didn't. Never even crossed my mind. I hated them. I killed them because, and then they got their other reason. Of course, they could be lying, so we don't even know. But now he may have been abused. All right. there's another interesting possible motive. Perhaps this guy had been abused by some other males and was angry that he suffered that. So in a sense, it was a hate crime against gay men for the abuse situation. Not necessarily racially. He wasn't anti-white people. He might have been anti-gay people. Possibly. Or here's another interesting thought. Maybe he's a closet gay himself, but is afraid to come out. And he's really annoyed that the rest of these people are having a good time. Or maybe he wants to be with these men, but then can't make himself do it. So he kills them and maybe goes home and then thinks about it. But he never touches them sexually. So except for that one guy with the underwear. Who knows? Yeah, he wanted to be like them. Maybe. Yeah, it's possible. Yeah. So also it's possible that these were easy victims for him. It may have nothing to do with their being gay, nothing to do with them being white, nothing to do with any kind of abuse situation, nothing to do with him being closeted and wanting to be like them. Maybe it's just that they were really easy victims, like prostitutes. Prostitutes are easy victims. You don't have to hate prostitutes to be a serial killer and kill them. You just have to say, wow, hey, $100, and the woman like jumps into your car, and it's a lot easier than trying to find somebody else. That's why prostitutes are victims. Not because people hate prostitutes, it's just because they're so easy to get a hold of. So a lot of gay guys in gay clubs, it's not a matter of falling in love and finding somebody. There's a lot of just wanting to have sex going on. And that's why you have bathhouses and things like that. And so if a guy's at the club looking for sex and an attractive young man comes along and says, he's an easy victim, he's a great target. So we don't actually know. And I thought that was what was most interesting about this case, was that you can guess all the different motives, but you actually have no clue. And so, we need to understand what we do and do not know and cannot know about certain crimes. So I thought that was an interesting one. I wanted to point out, there's a whole bunch of things I was asked to talk about today, and I got to figure out which one I want to talk about next. Hold on a second. World? Strange sounds in my house. Talking about parental abuse. And so I'm going to say that the video I'm going to put out, let me read you the title of the video I am going to put out. Maybe tomorrow, maybe Saturday. It is called, well, it'll be nice if this stuff worked. What the heck? Hold on a sec. And I forgot to put my Wi-Fi back on. I was out. The Wi-Fi doesn't work there. Okay. This one is going to be called Gypsy Rose Blanchard versus Maya Kowalski. I know I'm going to get a lot of flack on that one. So Gypsy Rose Blanchard versus Maya Kowalski. And the issue I have is mandatory reporting and even just a concern by the doctors about these two girls who Maya Kowalski's doctors thought her mother might be Munchausen syndrome, and Dee Dee, pretty much nobody paid any attention at all. So I'm going to do a whole video on that. But when we look at how the society responds, here's this poor kid. Let me tell you about this poor kid. I mean, just sometimes it just boggles your mind. You're like, why do we even have social services if we're not going to actually do something? And one of the problems, I think, with that is that if you do too little, people hate you. They accuse you of not trying to help. They accuse the government of allowing children to be harmed. If you do too much, then you're accused of trying to destroy families, not giving people a fair chance. So you see, it was like a no-win situation, right? So this one happened in Minnesota. And it says here, the title is Red Flags Ignored, Warnings Disregarded, and a Boy Murdered. Sometime on the morning of May 20th, 2022, Julissa Thaler pointed a shotgun at 6-year-old Eli Hart, this little boy, as her helpless son faced her, strapped in his car seat. She repeatedly fired, then stuffed the boy's mangled body into her trunk of the car. Later that day, a video shows she calmly ate pizza as police interrogated her. Eli's murder was seen as shocking, but it was also preventable. Was it? How far are social services allowed to go? What should the judges do? What should the doctors do? What should anybody do? You do too much, you get sued crapless. You do too little, you get sued crapless. I mean, and I, having been a foster parent, I know I've seen the system. I've been a foster parent twice. I know how it works. It's not good. And it's not because every social worker is bad. It's because a system, it's got like landmines through the whole damn thing. Our whole legal system has landmines. Let me tell you this story. So 10 days earlier, Dakota County had closed a child protection case against Thaler, one in which records show she repeatedly lied to caseworkers, filed false court claims, failed drug tests, committed crimes, and even stalked the boy's foster parents. She had a history of somebody that should not have a child in her custody. A history. It wasn't one thing, two things. It was a whole lineup. At what point do we say this person shouldn't get a break anymore? When do we say that this person just needs to be put away, or the child needs to be removed from her custody and never returned? Because that child should have some rights too. Not just mommy should get rights because mommy went to a, I don't know, she went to a couple therapy sessions and and passed 2 drug tests. So now kid goes home to it. Like that's a big, huge change. I love this 2-year thing. I'm a big person on 2 years. I believe you should date for 2 years before you get married. I believe once you're married, you should wait 2 years to have a child. It's about the amount of time it takes you to find out whether you should or you shouldn't. I think if you lose your child, if you lose custody, you should have to do enough over a relative period of time before that child is ever returned into your little hands. Okay, so this is one of the most shocking child fatalities, one of the most shocking failures of child protection I've seen in decades working in child welfare. So let's see what happened. For his safety, Eli had been removed from his mother's care in January of 2021 after she had a series of mental health breakdowns. Despite a wave of warning flags, they returned Eli to his mother 11 months later for a trial home visit. Now, what gave her the right to have an unsupervised trial home visit is questionable. It says here, there was absolutely no reason, no basis for returning this child to this mother or continuing the placement once it was obvious she was not going to follow through on the case plan. So, in my opinion, you ought to, before your kid gets back to you, you ought to prove that you are not on drugs for a reasonable period of time, that you have not committed any of the crimes for a reasonable period of time, that you've been in therapy for a reasonable period of time, that you're working for a reasonable period of time. In other words, a whole reasonable period of time has gone by, which you have shown stability, not just a week or two. So once back in his mother's care, Eli's caseworkers failed to act as abuse and neglect reports continued to flood into the county. So now he's returned and people are complaining. And the caseworkers are like, now this is what happens sometimes with caseworkers. Not a good thing either. They have so many cases with so much neglect and abuse that they become kind of dull, just dulled to the whole thing. They're so used to seeing this. Kids coming in, kids going out, the courts send them back. So that I think a lot of them just think, well, most of the time what happens is the kid will be like a ping pong ball and eventually, well, whatever will happen will happen. So let's see what happened with this kid though. One of the records say that Thaler got repeated chances because most of the reports made against her were that she was neglecting and mentally abusing Eli, but not physically abusing him. That's interesting. So if a child is not beat up, but he's neglected and mentally tortured, then it's not so bad. Maybe kind of like Gypsy. Eli's primary child protection worker, Beth Denner, who comes off really bad in this article. So Beth Denner, I don't know if you deserved every bit that you got, but it's not very good. If you're working as a social worker still, after I read this, either they're lying or you were that bad. She would repeatedly say in records that she was concerned that Eli's mental health, about his mental health, but not afraid for his physical safety. Now, it's interesting that one of the reports coming out from a child advocacy group called Safe Passages for Children identified numerous cases where the child suffered chronic neglect before being killed. In other words, in my opinion, neglect is abuse. A child who's neglected is being abused. But it's not seen that way. It should be seen that way. So if your child is not receiving proper care, not being fed, being left alone, that's abuse. It's not just neglect, in my opinion. And of course, what happens if a child is neglected to that extent? Guess what? Mommy or daddy doesn't really give a crap. They do not care about that child. If they don't care about that child, you don't know what the next step is going to be. It's like, hey, I'm done with that kid. That kid's a pain in the butt. And then they killed him. So let's see what this. The report said Eli was one of 88 Minnesota children who died from maltreatment since 2014. In 59 of those cases, there was a prior history of child protection. That's a lot of kids that died. And they had child protection orders. 59 of them had the child protection orders, and still they died. I find this interesting. Safe Passages Executive Director Rich Gehrman blames the system that too often values family reunification over child safety. This is a disaster sometimes. It's the concept that a biological parent, the child should always be returned to the biological parent as long as you can make it possible. And the problem is, I see that to some point. But at some point, you also say that biological parent shouldn't be around children. And if that's true, that child should not be returned to them, because that biological parent is not a biological parent who loves them. Don't torture them forever in those situations and put their lives at risk, because I have an adopted son, and I'm going to say he was safer with me. And he's now 40 because he got a mommy who loved him and raised him and cared for him and didn't neglect or abuse him. So perhaps if there was a short period of time where the biological mother was willing to go to therapy and get help and all kinds of other things because she truly wanted her child back, well, that would be a different matter. But if that didn't happen, that child deserved a home. The child deserved a mom and a dad, and he got that. Thank God. So I want to just point out a couple other things they said here I thought was interesting. There's another comment here I just thought was quite fascinating. Where is it? Let me see if I can find it. Thead, this is the mother, began drinking at age 13. She abused opiates at age 16 and sedatives at 20. She was repeatedly hospitalized and sent to treatment. She was diagnosed with at least 2 personality disorders. She was 21 when she used LSD on a daily basis. That year, in December 2015, Child Protection got its first report. She was suspected of exposing Eli to drugs before she even gave birth to him. That's lovely. He was born with Townes-Brocks syndrome, a rare genetic disorder caused abnormalities. He needed hearing aids for the rest of his life. But when he was a year and a half old, Child Protection got a report that his mother was delusional and despondent and thought a bug was trying to attack her son. The only way Eli could get her attention was to bang his head on a table. County closed the case after Thaler agreed to get treatment for herself and Eli. Close the case. My opinion is you do not close a case when the child is not safe. Just because she says she's going to get treatment is nonsense. That's meaningless. Her delusions often directed at Eli's father, Tori, whom she continually accused of violently abusing her, but never had any evidence to support her claims. So at one point, she admitted to constantly lying about him. At 2019, this gets worse and worse. She accused him of planting a bomb in her car. Though police found only a water bottle full of nails, Thaler used that report to get a restraining order, which barred Tori from contacting her. Since she had sole custody of her son, Tori felt he had no way of being with Eli. Then she moved, had more mental breakdowns. She left Eli naked among broken eggs, rotting garbage, and a flooded bathroom. I mean, How much does it take for, if you're going to have social services, how much does it take for the justice system to say this child should not be in this person's custody? Then she heard, 3 months later, she heard voices telling her to kill herself. And when they came to the home, they found that Eli had cuts, matted hair, and was up without his hearing aid. So he was being abused and neglected. So what did they do? They put 5-year-old Eli into legal custody, and they moved him into foster care with Thaler's cousin. He was kind and energetic, a really nice kid. He quickly became beloved, and his foster parents were doing great. To get Eli back, now let's see what she needs to get him back. Thaler needed to meet what should have been basic requirements as a parent. The court spelled them out: treat and stabilize her mental health, meet her his medical needs, maintain clean and stable housing, remain drug-free, and submit to random testing. Have her age-appropriate conversations with Eli. All right. Eli's father wanted to be part of the case, but Tori did not have custody of his son and was not considered a placement option. So anyway, he had to undergo parenting and psychological evaluations, none of which identified any concerns. Meanwhile, during the next 11 months, Thaler, the mommy, denied any wrongdoing, fixated on accusing Tori of trying to harm her and Eli. She ignored instructions from social workers and lied to them, and then begged them to return her son. At one visit, Mom told Eli that she is living off of Mountain Dew and cigarettes. So then she missed or tampered with drug tests. And then she stole pain meds and needles from an Apple Valley clinic. So at what point did they return this child to her? I got to find this out now. She moved 4 times, and she moved four homes in 4 months. She was homeless 4 times. She was kicked out of drug testing for being disruptive. The woman's a mess. Her accusations against Tori continued. So this is, we're seeing probably a level of psychopathy and psychotic behavior together, probably because of the massive amount of drugs she kept doing. All right, so the visits went poorly between Eli and his mother. At one point, she dug her fingernails into social service staff member's hand and threw garbage at her. At a visit a week later, the social worker reported that she ignored Eli for long stretches and just stared into space while he said, "Can you play with me?" And the caseworker said, "That woman's crazy, man." I'm still looking for here when he got returned. Child protection worker Danner, shared these concerns, but felt Thaler was meeting parts of her case plan. She worried that would complicate any effort to strip Thaler's rights to Eli. I don't think Julissa will maintain what she's currently doing, but in my opinion, that's not enough to win in court. So that's when they returned the child to her and had this unsupervised visit. Oh, good God. And then she killed him. Now, the reason I'm going through this whole story here is because you can see sometimes, no matter how horrible a child's home life is, how many times the parent has contact with social services, and social services sees over and over and over again this child is being abused, tortured, and all of these things. For some reason, they rarely take enough action, and a lot of it's because there's not many foster homes. But in this case, there was a family, it was a connected family member that took the child in, and they should have left the child with them. And at some point, they should have just simply removed her parental rights. I mean, I believe if you can't get your act together in 2 years, just terminate your parental rights, because you don't care about your kid. Sorry. Your kid, you can't fix yourself up for your kid. You shouldn't have become that mess anyway. But if you can't fix yourself up for your child, you don't deserve the child. The child deserves a mom or a dad or both. But this is what we see. So we see cases over and over again of massive abuse of children, and we have a failing system that doesn't really respond. And the same thing is true with Munchausen syndrome by proxy. That we if you do respond to it, you get then people say you're being mean to the parent. Parents have rights, but if you don't do anything, people say, well, why didn't you save the child? It's like a no-win situation sometimes, and sometimes it is tricky because you can overstep. There's definitely government people, medical people, social workers, teachers who overstep because they don't like the lifestyle of the parent. It's like, well, the child has to be raised a certain way, and you're doing something different. Then you should have your child removed. I've seen that. I mean, I grew up. I had my kids at a time when co-sleeping, family bed. You could have your child removed for having a family bed, which is like most of the world sleeps in a family bed. But in the U.S., they somehow conflated family bed with sexual abuse because your child was sleeping near your body parts, you know. And that's so that was a whole thing for a while. It was people who had family beds were terrified that the social workers would come and take their children away. Homeschoolers are also afraid of having the children removed because, like, you must be abusive if you're a homeschooler. So there's a lot of things that you can do. You can indeed overstep and say that person's lifestyle is unacceptable and that child shouldn't be raised that way. And that's not okay, because we all have different ways of raising children. We have different cultures. We have, different subcultures. And I've seen some kids raised in ways where I'm like, I wouldn't be doing that. But then again, the kid turns out okay, and they weren't really abusing. They weren't abusing the child nor neglecting the child. They just have different methodologies of raising children. And so you don't want to overstep. But on the other hand, when you have that many reports to social services, a person's doing these horrific things to the child and lying and stealing and attacking people. I mean, what point do you just say, why does the child not get a say? Why is the child not being protected? Why are you protecting the parent and not the child? I find that, kind of interesting. I'll look at some of your comments. But, this becomes, one of the reasons we have a lot of child homicides. And we have children who grow up in situations like Gypsy because nobody intervened. In Gypsy's case, nobody intervened. Let's see. Yes, the child should come first. Absolutely. I mean, they should. I mean, if you're going to have a child, that is now your responsibility. And you shouldn't be walking away from it. And of course, the problem is a lot of people have children. It's so easy to get pregnant. That a lot of people have children who aren't ready to have children, don't want children, but they have them anyway, and then they keep them, and they don't take care of them properly. But yes, I mean, in my opinion, if you're an adult and you have a child, I'm sorry, but that is your responsibility. And above anything else in your life, that is your responsibility. And that's probably true, Texas Redhead. Some people need to be neutered. But that can happen. That can happen in certain countries. And then that becomes not just, again, a government overreach. And is it okay to neuter people? So, yeah, but, this is true. Charlotte says there have been way too many cases where babies have been left in squalor, being ignored by their parents, and they die. Yeah. Neglect is abuse. I just wish we'd, I don't know why we have such a separation of the two concepts. So if I neglect my child by leaving him alone in a crib, screaming for mommy and not being fed, is that not abuse? I don't know how that's not abuse. So it's bizarre to me. Yeah, I go with that. Abuse is abuse. Yeah, I go with that. Then when the kids grow up, here's another thing. This is an interesting thing. This guy, I don't know why this case struck me, but this guy, is that the guy? No, that's not the guy. Sorry. This guy. Okay. This guy's name is Seth Carnes. He just shot to death his father and his mother, retired judge. And this guy's 45 years old, and he's killing off his parents. I don't know about those ears, but anyway, my family has ears like that, so I shouldn't say that he looks weird. Kind of looks weird. But the thing about this one, when you wonder where, okay, so now I don't know what happened in his whole childhood. They don't have all that information. But where's the story? Oh, here we go. Oh, no, that's not it. Hold on a second. Where'd it go? Oh, come on. I've lost my story. Oh, here we go. All right. Some of the things he said were just fascinating. So he shoots this happened in A retired Texas judge and his wife had been found dead from shotgun blasts inside their home, leading to the arrest of their adult son, who police say admitted to gunning down both his parents because he did not want to take a sleeping aid. Now, first of all, when people give excuses for what they do, I always find that fascinating. It's like, you're 45 years old. Somebody says you need to take the sleeping pill. First of all, I don't know why he's taking sleeping pills. I don't know if anybody actually offered him a sleeping pill. But he's 45 years old, so I'm pretty sure that if he didn't want to swallow it, he didn't have to swallow it. And he'd get in an argument with mom. But, you're living in their home. You're 45, so I'm not sure what your issue is. Anyway, he was arrested Monday night and charged with capital murder, killing his mother and father. He allegedly told detectives he did not know what happened. Well, but he was aware that he had shot his parents with a Remington 870 shotgun he kept on the nightstand in his parents' converted garage where he lived. Now, one of the things I've noted with a number of parents who have children, big children, living with them, is that their access to any kind of weapon is interesting to me. Because if I have a child I quite question is safe in the head, I don't really want to have him have a shotgun. If you're going to live in my house, you're not having a weapon, because I don't want you near the knives either. But he had a shotgun. The son allegedly said he believed his mother was trying to put a sleeping pill in his mouth that he did not want to take. Because, a 74-year-old woman and a 45-year-old man, I'm sure she could shovel that thing right into his mouth, because she's got to be the stronger of the two. He indicated there was no reason for him to shoot his mother other than the sleeping pill. That's his dire reason. They're great people. We just went on vacation. They pay my rent because I'm not working. They're really fun to be around. But that sleeping pill, that just went beyond the pale. So when an investigator asked why Carnes shot his father, because his mother was the one shoving the sleeping pill in his mouth, he said, "I'm just looking for something, and I figured I'd finish the job." Okay, that was nice of you. Shortly before midnight, Seth Carnes' daughter called 911 saying her father had shot her grandfather. And the deputies rushed out, and they came face to face with Seth, who walked out of his house with one hand up and the other one holding a coffee mug. Well, he was actually really bent out of shape, because, okay, don't shoot me. It's all good. And then they entered the house. They found the father on the floor with a shotgun and spent shell lying in the kitchen area. Susan Carnes' body was found in her son's bedroom. So I guess she did go into the son's bedroom. I don't know if they said there was a sleeping pill involved, because I don't see that in the article. The former judge had injuries to his elbow, inner forearm, and the left side of his rib cage. The wife had apparently been shot in the left shoulder and collarbone, and they tried to save her life. It didn't work. All right. The preliminary investigation suggests that the murders resulted from a disagreement escalating to family violence and death. Now, I want to stop right here. Over and over, I say the same thing. Preliminary investigation suggests the murders resulted from a disagreement. 2 people are dead. Only one is alive. The one that's alive is blaming the victims. We had a disagreement. She did this to me. You have no clue if there was ever a disagreement. He just may have wanted to get rid of his mother and father, period. There's when the killer gives a statement about what happened, and the victim or victims are not alive to say that's not true, then you should never believe it. This one's been used quite a few times, where a guy says, "I shot the guy because he made a pass at me, and I'm not gay." Well, first of all, we don't know that he actually made a pass at you. Even if the guy was gay, we still don't know if he made a pass at you. And sometimes the guy has not even been known to be gay, and yet the guy's claiming he was gay making a pass. So, did this even happen? Or is this an excuse for killing another man? Because somehow that's understandable that, if a guy makes a pass at you and you're a dude, you freak out, right? Blaming the victim is a common psychopathic trait. A thing that they do all the time, especially when they kill somebody. That I only knocked on the woman's door. I was going to talk to her, and she got nasty toward me, and she shoved me, and therefore I killed her. But there's nobody around to prove that. Unless you got a camera there that shows that's exactly what happened. Do not believe a killer. Do not believe somebody who just does this stuff. Now it says here, the family was wonderful, except for that kid, obviously. The deeply distressing incident. They didn't say anything about the 45-year-old son living in the garage. So I don't know who he is and why he did what he did, but I just find it interesting, the stories that are given. Oh, I have not. Yes, the Menendez brother. I am planning to do a series at some point on certain issues. And the Menendez brothers, of course, many people ask me about that. So on the heels of like Gypsy, the Menendez brothers said they killed their parents because they were abused by them. And so I will have to review that case. I've been planning to do it. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. No one should be medicated against their will. Of course not. The dude is 45. He cannot be medicated against his will. Gypsy was medicated against her will. This dude was not. He was not. Oh, he was thorough. Yeah, he got rid of Dad too. I mean, well, oh, wait a minute. No sleeping pill, but a shotgun. I don't know. I can't find anything in the story about any sleeping pill even existing. But, even if it did. If mom, this is a good point, Clarissa. If mom is administering meds, son must have some mental issues and not responsible to live by himself. And this is a great point. If you have certain children, adult children, do have mental problems, and there are families who will say, well, that my son has been suffering from delusions, he suffers from all kinds of psychoses, and yet they keep them at home. My personal opinion is that if that person is truly suffering from those kind of things, a family is not capable of caring for them, and it is not safe for the family to care for them. I think they should be institutionalized. But there's a lot of stuff these days which say, hey, don't institutionalize people. Let them back out in society. Let them live a normal life, and as long as they take their meds. But an awful lot of times they don't take their meds. And so what do you do when they don't take their meds and they start having delusions again? And it gets very dangerous. And of course, why does the dude have a shotgun? If he's got mental problems, a shotgun shouldn't be in the house. But then again, knives will do it too. Well, no, there's a lot of people who've been stabbed to death with knives by their psychotic children. So I do feel sorry for families if they can't get proper institutionalized care for a child who is not capable of actually being on the outside. But there they are in your house. It just sucks. You know what I mean? So, yeah. What I want to talk. Oh, somebody asked me about this case. I thought this was. Where is it? Really interesting. You find it. Let me see which one it is. I've got I got to check my time. Okay. I'm going to have to save a lot of this stuff for next week because I got myself sort of distracted by certain things. But somebody asked me to talk about this case. I thought this is not a whodunit. It's like, are they ever going to arrest the dude, right? So this guy, they're lacking a certain amount of proof. This occurred. Michael, I think his name is Lavoie, but don't quote me on that, was recently engaged to Sheryl Sheppard on the left before she disappeared in 1998. Now they do have a show here, CBC's, and someone knows something. He's the primary suspect. He attempts to speak supposedly to the primary suspect. I guess he don't want to speak, but that's Sheryl, and this is another picture of Sheryl. She disappeared more than 25 years ago on New Year's Eve in 1998. Now, what happened with her, and is he involved? And this case, I find there's a bunch of things I find interesting about it. Okay. She is a missing Hamilton woman. This is Canada, I believe, right? Yeah. I believe it's Canada. Hamilton's in Canada, right? I think I've been to Hamilton. I don't know why I was in Hamilton. but I think I was there. A missing Hamilton woman who vanished almost 2 decades ago, allegedly. Now, this was her boyfriend, and what he did was he proposed to her at a bar, and so let me. Okay, here was where it was. She had gone. She's 29 years old. She'd been to a New Year's party 2 days before with her boyfriend Michael, who proposed there on live TV. Now, I will say this over and over again: never ever propose to anybody in public. I hate this crap. Unless the only way it works is if you've actually, gotten together already. She's already accepted your proposal, and then you pretend that she didn't know about it. And then you have you have all your friends there, and then you go, "Will you marry me, honey?" And she's like, "Oh, what a surprise." But it isn't. But a proposal to me done in public is an atrocity if that person didn't see it coming. Because a proposal is something that is a time when one person reaches out to the other and says, "I truly want you to be my spouse for the rest of my life." And this is something, such a serious decision, such a major serious decision, that obviously, theoretically, both people are in the same place. And then when the proposal is made, it's not a big surprise, but it's like, oh, it's a nice thing. But when a person pops the question in a public location, puts that person in a situation, you've seen this on some of the, the football games, the guy's like, "Will you marry me?" And the woman's like, "Oh God, no." And then the guy's all like, and then he's all embarrassed. Dude, don't propose in a stadium, because you should be pretty sure that her answer is going to be yes, but she should have the privacy that when you do this, if you're a guy proposing to a lady, that she could say, I really would like to, but I'm not ready for that. Or I do care about you, but you misunderstood that we're not appropriate. So, sometimes people get turned down on these things, but just don't do it in a public place. Well, he proposed to her in this public place, and she's like, because they're all drinking anyway, so they're drunk. So, hey, oh, yeah, I'm getting married. Then what happened was, it says that she had told friends claim that Sheppard had told her, a friend, she was planning to tell Michael she couldn't marry him. She also claims that she was planning to tell Michael in a public place so he wouldn't flip out because he had a temper. The friend also says that Michael had a bad habit of grabbing Sheppard by the throat when they would get into an argument or a fight, and that Sheppard was a little afraid of him. Here's where I say, ladies, anybody, if you have a boyfriend who puts his hand on you in any way, shape, and guys, I don't care who you're with. If you're with a significant other and you're dating somebody and they hit you, they choke you, they shove you, you have intense arguments that makes you frightened, this is not a person you want to spend the rest of your life with. This is a person you want to run away from. And people so often, somehow, you have to have enough love of yourself and self strength to say, hey, I don't want to be the person who treats me this way. But so many people, they are very fragile egos. They're very needy. And they're like, okay, so he does choke me, but the next day we went to dinner. It was great. He had fun. Okay, but he choked you. Well, yeah, but, then we went dancing. Okay, don't forget the choking part. Well, apparently poor Sheryl did have some issues with him, ongoing issues, and he pops this question in a public place. She said yes, and then she's like, oh my God. Now she doesn't know how to get out of it because the guy obviously is violent. She wants to do it in a public place. And here's where I always say, I think she was right about that she should be in a public place and not alone when she tells him, oh, by the way, I don't want to get married. But then she better be sure she never is around him again. And he can't get to her again, because probably a lot of times when people break up and the guy says, oh, can we just meet to talk about things? And I just want closure. The closure is killing you. So she's going to be in a situation where she's that afraid to tell him no, and she has to be in a public place. She should never be alone with him. But guess what happens? All right, so she's at home. She vanishes. All right. And in her house, let me tell you what's seen in her house. Hold on a second. Got to go to the other page. In her house, there was a bare mattress stripped of its sheets. Glass was missing from a picture frame above the bed. Broken glass was in a box on the balcony. Her clothes were still in her closet. Her wallet with a flower patterned fabric was left behind, as if she left with nothing. Now, boyfriend says this. He claims that he dropped her off at a hotel in Niagara Falls, where he said she would be working as an exotic dancer, and she was never seen again. Now, I'm pretty sure that the 2 + 2 in this case equals 4. So something happened in her house, which looks like a violent fight. The sheet is missing from her bed, which indicates to me, obviously, something happened there that he had to wrap her up and take her away. And then the claim that he drove her to a hotel. Now, this was smart, actually. He drops her off at a hotel where she's going to be an exotic dancer. Now, I personally don't know. That's a little weird because I didn't know you had exotic dancing in hotels. Near hotels, yes, but in hotels, that's kind of weird. So basically he's saying, because a good portion, and people are going to get angry, and I'm going to do a whole show on this because there's an interesting case where a woman who was involved with sex crimes and was a journalist as well, disappeared, has never been seen. I'm going to do a show on that. Fascinating. Maybe I'll do it this weekend. But he drops her off at a place. She's getting a job essentially in the sex business. Exotic dancers, some people say, okay, go-go dancers, strippers, and all this. Oh, they're not prostitutes. They just dance around and present a show. Anybody who's ever, I did too much study on this stuff. I'll say this. Most of the time, prostitution is involved. I'm not saying there's not a person who didn't involve themselves in prostitution, but that's how people made all that. Most of the time they make their money, and that the managers want them to make their money in prostitution so that the people come there to look at the go-go dancer, but they go home and they get sex. They want to see the striptease, but they want to have sex. So yes, some people just go there and see a show, but the manager knows that a lot of them are there for after the fact getting some kind of sex. So there's a lot of sex trade involved. So if he says she was an exotic dancer, the first thing, and I can't find any information that she actually was in this business. Maybe she was, but I can't find it at this moment. But she's in a business that's involving prostitution. It's a dangerous business. So if he says he dropped her off, well, I can't help. Maybe she turned a trick. Maybe even if she wasn't a prostitution, if she's getting into exotic dancing, maybe the people around her are sketchy and they did something to her. So dropping somebody off in an area which is questionable is a good methodology. Of course, we don't know that he dropped her off anywhere near there. He's just claiming he did. I'm sure she's more likely in a shallow grave someplace or at the bottom of a river, but his claim that he dropped her off there allows them to search that area and think maybe some shady person over here did her in after he dropped her off. And if they cannot prove otherwise, even if the detectives are going, messed up, well, something happened in her bedroom, the sheet's gone, he probably took her body out, probably dumped it somewhere, and now he's claiming this exotic, that's where he took her to Niagara Falls. We don't believe a bit of this, but how do you prove it? And I guess they never did, because it's been 25 years and he has not been arrested. Nobody's been arrested. And I know her body has never been found. So if you can't get the proof, even though you might think 2 + 2 does equal 4, you're kind of screwed. But again, ladies, men, anybody, you got somebody who behaves like that towards you, one time is enough. If you allow it to happen 2 times, they're going to peg you as a person they can control and victimize. And then by the time that happens a few times, and then they ask you to marry them, and you turn around and say no, it's not going to go well. So try not to ever get in that position, because you can't back out of things very easily with people who are controlling, possessive, psychopathic. let's see. What is it? My cousin left her abusive husband with just a can of soup and a can opener. Took everything else. Well, you know, I will say this. If you're in an abusive situation, just think of the fact that a lot of people won't leave because they do have they're living together. They got their stuff there. They got, you know, things that are meaningful to them, their possessions, their memories, everything's in that spot. Sometimes children too. And they don't want to leave because they want to not lose those things, but then they end up losing their lives. So, you know, it's say, try to avoid getting hooked up with those people. That's why the 2 years again. If you're dating somebody and during 2 years, you're going to probably get a clue if they're sketchy or not. Don't ever move in with them until you know that there's somebody safe to move in with. Don't marry them until you know they're safe to marry. Don't have children with them until you know they're safe to have children with. An exotic dancer is euphemism for hooker. Well, a lot of dancers, go-go dancers, strippers, massage parlor people, and all those things will say that's not true, but in general, it is true, and because that's the way the business works. But I'm not saying there's not. I was in the business and I never did that. All right, you might be the exception, or you're lying. I don't know which one, but I'm not going to say everyone in the business. I'm just going to say that's how the business works. Oh, no, there's been nothing since she disappeared. She's clearly dead. There's no question about that. Oh, control. It's too nice, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I'm not sure which one you're talking about on that. Sorry. Now, one other case, I'm going to talk about this one. I don't really have an answer on this one, but it's just so freaky fascinating. This is a very old one, which is why I won't do a whole show on it. But Risch, in 1960, the bizarre thing about the case is that they've never found her. So it's another person who's never been found. It is surprising how many people vanish and are never found. People always think that somebody's kidnapped or they run away and have an accident or they commit suicide someplace. They're always found. There's just so many people who are never found. Honestly, I don't have an answer for it, except that there's a lot of locations where it's very hard to retrieve bodies from. Certain bodies of water. Oh, as a matter of fact, I wonder what happened to Nancy Eng. I haven't looked. Hold on a second. I got to check something out. Just because now I'm curious. Remember Nancy Eng? I talked about her. She's the one that went kayaking in Guatemala, and she disappeared. And wow. Okay, nothing's happened. I was curious whether anything was come up on that case. So people were saying that she was murdered and all kinds of things. I don't think so. I think it was an accident. But her body's never been found, and it's December. She went missing a while back. So I don't know where her body is. At the bottom of the lake. I don't know. That's why people have the suspicion she was murdered and her body was taken someplace else. But we don't know if that's true. But a lot of people, their bodies are just never freaking found. I don't know where they are. Some people, probably some are given to pigs. Some are down a mine shaft. Some are in rivers. Some are in shallow graves and are just not found in some weird mountain location. But it's amazing how often it happens. And people keep saying, oh, if this happened, their body would have been found. And I'm just here to tell you that's not true. So the disappearance of Joan Risch is so freaky. So what happened? This was Lincoln, Massachusetts, in 1961. A neighbor reported seeing a trail of blood leading from the house to the driveway. And the young girl that lived in the house came over to her, and she had been on a play date. She went back home across just right next door, and found a problem with her mother. Mother wasn't there. That was the problem. And so she reported this to the neighbor, and the police showed up. She said there was red paint. The daughter said there's red paint in the kitchen, which was not red paint. All right. There were some unconfirmed sightings that day that the woman that looked like her, a disoriented woman, was walking on nearby roads, but then she vanished. Blood matching Risch's type was found smeared in the kitchen, and other evidence initially suggested to police she had been abducted, though her 2-year-old son was found safe asleep. So her kids were fine, but she was gone. Now, Supposedly she was a happy woman. She was married to, let's see, who was she married to? She went to college in Pennsylvania, got a degree in English literature. She went to work in the publishing industry. She became an editorial assistant at Harcourt Brace. She married an executive of one of the companies and left work to raise a family. They had their first child, Lillian, and then a son. And she was active in the League of Women Voters. And she was planning to become a teacher when the children got older. She sounds perfectly fine, right? Nice home, decent husband, all that stuff. So on the morning of October 24th, her husband, Martin, gets up. He gets up early, leaves the house in his car for Logan Airport to catch a flight to New York City. It's a business trip. All right. Shortly after his departure, so the husband flew away. So people say, "What? Did the husband do something?" No, he's gone. He flies away. Joan wakes the children, serves them some breakfast, takes her son across the street to the house of a neighbor, Barbara Barker, and left with Lillian in her car to go to a dentist appointment. All right. After the dentist appointment, Joan takes Lillian on a brief shopping trip to a department store, paying in cash. And at the family home, milk and mail were delivered, and they didn't see anything weird there. So after she returns home. She picks up David, the son, from the Barker residence, and she and the children go into the house at 11:15 a.m. Shortly afterward, a dry cleaner comes to pick up some suits of Martin's. He didn't say anything was out of the ordinary. He saw her. She was fine. She had worn more formal clothing to the dentist. She'd come home and changed into a house dress and some white sneakers. All right. Joan makes children. She already made 2 children. Now she's making lunch for those children. Joan made lunch for her children and put David in a room for his afternoon nap, which lasted till 2 p.m. So this is a routine. At 1 p.m., she brought her son, Douglas. Oh, did she have another Douglas? Okay, she's got an extra son. Sorry. Also age 4. Oh, okay. Aren't they twins? Okay. Over to play with Lillian. During this time they were there, they observed Joan coming in and out. Oh, Barbara Barker's son. I'm sorry. Barbara Barker's son was Douglas. She came over to her house. While they were there, they noticed that Joan had gone out to prune some plants. And then as she pruned some plants, she took the shears and she put them back in the garage. Okay, so again, everything's normal. The neighbor's thinking everything's fine. Shortly before 2 p.m., Joan comes out again, takes the children back across the street to the Barker home. She told the 2 she would be back. And I guess these 2 just always, kind of share kids. I got to do some crap, take my kids, I'll go do something. Lillian later told the police she did not see anyone else in the area at the time. That's the daughter. She and Douglas played on the swing set, and they could not actually see the Risch house. Around 2:15 p.m., Barker, the neighbor, briefly saw Joan wearing what she thought was a trench coat over her clothing, moving quickly up her driveway, carrying something red with outstretched arms moving from her car toward the garage. She thought she was chasing one of the kids. She just didn't know what was going on out there. That was the last sighting of Joan. So then the daughter of the next door neighbor got off the school bus, and she saw a car that she did not recognize. So this is one of the possibilities there. Then when Barbara Barker took Lillian back to her home at 3:40, she intended taking her children on a shopping trip, and she thought Joan was in the house. When she returned at 4:15, Lillian came back to the house saying, "Mommy is gone and the kitchen is covered with red paint." Lillian's brother was crying in the crib because his diaper needed to be changed. So Barbara goes over to the Risch house, and it's true, she wasn't there. She called the police. The police found a whole bunch of stuff. Bloody smears on the walls, an overturned table. The handset was ripped out of the wall, thrown into a wastebasket. And they thought she committed suicide. So they searched the house for her body because there's blood all over the kitchen, but not so much blood that it would have killed her. When they did not find it, they continued searching. They called the hospitals. No, she was not at any of the hospitals. The husband came back home, flew back in. In the house, they found some other clues. Now, what were they? There was some issue about liquor bottles, but that didn't make any sense. The husband said, "No, we drank that before, so that's not an issue." They thought maybe somebody had cited her, but they weren't sure about that. All people calling stuff in. The blood evidence. Large amounts, smears were found on the kitchen walls and floor, some on the phone. 3 bloody fingerprints were unidentified because they didn't have any of her fingerprints. I'm not sure they couldn't find, lift some fingerprints from someplace else in the home and then compare them. Maybe it's a long time ago. A roll of paper towels is on the floor. One had been used to wipe some blood up, possibly off a hand. So they're seeing all these blood stains, but it said they thought originally it was a struggle, but then it looked more like somebody was just staggering around and trying to support themselves following an injury. And this whole thing just freaking made no sense. So now she's disappeared. They never find her. All right. So here we have a happy woman, seemingly happy woman with future plans, kids that she cared about. And in the middle of the day, there's a bloodbath. Either somebody hurt her or she hurt herself in the kitchen. And then she leaves. There's no proof that she got in a car to leave, but she's missing. And somebody thought they saw a woman with blood running around someplace, but her body's never been found. But here's the thing that's weird. And this is one of these things that makes this the case that you go, what really happened? All right. They went to the library and they were checking out stuff about her, just her background. They found out that she had gone to the public library. Oh, no, wait a minute. Sorry. A reporter from the newspaper went to the public library to research similar cases that had this kind of a background. And so she picks up this book about the disappearance of Brigham Young, his wife, 27th wife, because he got a lot of them. So she picked up this book to read this book about the disappearance of Brigham Young's wife. And then she noticed when she turned the book that the card in there, Joan had checked out that book a month before her disappearance. Okay. Now, this is when you used to sign things and you put the little card in the book. So it was purely accidental. She ran into this book and Joan had been interested in the disappearance of this woman. But, is that a big deal? Well, not necessarily. However, she also checked out a book called Into Thin Air about a woman who, like Risch, had left behind blood smears and a towel when she went missing. Her signature was also, again, Joan's signature was on that card. She reported that findings to the newspaper. A group of library volunteers then looked through all the records. They found out that Joan, a regular borrower, had taken out 25 books over the summer of 1961, many of which also had to do with murders or missing persons cases. Based on this, they believed that she might have staged her own disappearance and left voluntarily. What do you think? How would you analyze this case? Now, as a profile, the reason I'm not going to do a whole show on this is because I don't have, when you talk about cases that are 50 years old, I can't delve into all the police reports and I just don't have enough information to make determinations. But there are some interesting things about it. What do you think is most like strikes you as just one of those fascinating things that you go, what about that? Hold on a second. Wait a minute. Are we talking about I'm having, sometimes when people put comments, and I'm not quite sure which case they're talking about when I've done a bunch of them because we're having side conversations here. When you look at somebody's past history, you have to, and you look at somebody who's taken out that many books in recent months about disappearances and staged murders, and then this occurs to them. Generally speaking, that is a suggestion that they were that interested in this, that they made this happen. For what reasons is the question. With all the research she did, I think she disappeared. It seems that way, but the funny thing is, I don't know where the evidence is that she wanted to give up her life that badly. Like, the life, her children, everything she had going for her. Where did she go? Where did she go? And we're not talking, that doesn't appear to be something like a psychotic break because she'd been studying this. And the concept, especially the one where the person also left the blood evidence in the kitchen and stuff. Did she think this was going to be more believable because rather than just vanish, and people say, oh, maybe she just ran away. Did she believe if she left blood that therefore it would look like an abduction? And she would then, therefore, wouldn't be a bad person who ran away, but somebody who was a good mother and had been abducted? Is that the mentality here? You also think she disappeared on her own. So we have problems. Sometimes we're commenting on different things. But when you're looking at people's history, and a lot of times nowadays we even have more because of the internet, people, emails, text messages, search. The searches on the internet are huge these days because people, as I've always pointed out, often search a lot of things before they do something, because at the time they're searching, they're not thinking they're actually going to follow through with whatever it is, which could be suicide, could be murder, could be some theft, it could be whatever they're interested in. And what they're doing is they're searching. How can I get away with this? How do people do that? And they don't think about that they're leaving a whole bread trail on the internet because of their search engines, their searches, because their searches are locked into the history. But back in the day, she didn't have the internet. But we have a woman who goes to a library, and is it coincidence that this woman who seems to be stable and all this stuff has that much interest in people going missing under strange circumstances? And then she goes missing under strange circumstances. Is that coincidental? Or does that show, just like a search engine on the internet, that she was going in there and working on a plan, coming up with an idea? I'd love to see police interviews and all this kind of stuff. I'd like to see what else was going wrong in this woman's life, because I can't believe everything was normal and then this happened. So I haven't done a tremendous amount of research on the case, but maybe there's evidence that things weren't so smooth and she had issues. But the leaving the librarians are always up to no good. What is this woman's name? Her name was Emily Risch. No, sorry. I'm on the wrong place myself. Joan Risch. Joan Carolyn Risch. I think I have it on the picture here. Yeah. Joan Carolyn Risch. And that was a picture of her in 1960, and she disappeared in 1961. Just a kind of just interesting case that probably doesn't have any great answers, but you think she was just curious about missing persons. And that could be. You see, this is where the problem comes in. Maybe she just had a thing. People are fascinated by certain things. So just because you read books on serial killers doesn't mean you're planning to be a serial killer, right? Just because you're interested in child abuse doesn't mean you're abusing your child. So when you're investigating or profiling, you have to be careful that somebody's not interested in something, and then just out of bad luck, something occurs that makes them look like their research had to do with what happened. So it's tricky. And I don't know what all of the police investigations came up with back then. If I find out more before next week, I might just come back and say, hey, I found out all this about Joan Risch, that she had all these issues. Or that was just an interest of hers, and she just loved reading about that stuff. But in the middle of the day is not a time. She had middle of the day, two children in the house, or one child, and the other child was supposed to be next door, but was brought home. Somebody just pulled up in the middle of the day, attacked her in the kitchen. There's a big fight, and drags her out. And nobody sees anything. And it's the middle of the day. That's kind of weird. Now, some people will say maybe the husband hired a hit. He made sure he was out of town, hired a hit on his wife. Is that possible? Yeah, it is. It is possible. So we don't know. And they never figured it out. So I may do some more research into that, because it's kind of just a interesting story. Yeah. Interesting story from way back. Where's her body? What happened to her? So I'm going to check to see if I can find out more about her husband and, her life, and see what's going on. Because it is suspicious that she would have an obsession with this kind of thing, especially the case that was very similar to hers, and then have that enacted out in her house in the middle of the day. That's pretty strange. So unless she's just got really bad luck and her husband planned to do her in, and maybe she was talking to him about people that disappeared. He goes, "Oh, I'll make you disappear." See, you can come up with a ton of stories. The problem is, do we have any evidence to support anything? And so I'll look for some more evidence. If you all find some more evidence before the next hangout, let me know. And maybe we'll solve the case together. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to head off. And I have not decided on the weekend case yet. I have not, because I've been busy with the Gypsy Rose Blanchard thing. So I don't know which one I'm going to do yet. But I have at least another day to figure it out. And then I'll send you all a link. We're saying a similar case to somebody's body found years later. Sometimes the bodies do turn up 30 years later, or the person turns up 30 years later. There was one case where the woman vanished and everybody thought the husband did her in, and she hadn't turned it out. She was like living in Florida homeless for like 20 years, and she was alive, and but she was obviously not altogether home, upstairs. But that poor husband, I mean, he spent probably, a couple of decades of his life being considered a killer. And, how do you prove you're not when the body doesn't even show up? They don't show up. The body doesn't show up. Everybody's like, well, you must have done a good job getting rid of her. Yeah, that's horrible. I mean, I always feel sorry for a person who's in that situation where there's just no way they can prove themselves innocent. Unless they find the person. Lucky for that guy, they finally found her wandering around. She was alive. So you have a gross case for me right in the neighborhood. Well, send it to me. Send me a message. And I didn't get to everything everybody wanted me to do tonight because I got sidetracked with the whole, again, the Gypsy Rose Blanchard thing. But I have a lot more. I'll just move all this to hangout number 124, because I only did half of the things I had set up here, and some of you had asked specifically. So maybe next week I'll do that. Yeah. So anyway, thank you all for being here. I always appreciate that. Lisa asks, I very much do. Oh, you're late again. Watch the replay. Well, that's why we have replays. And if you are a patron, you've joined Patreon, you know that. Wait a minute. At least I think you don't have any advertisements, do you? Because when it's unlisted, I thought there's no advertising. Am I incorrect about that? You have to tell me. When it goes public, there's advertising, because that's how I support the channel. Of course, if you really don't want to see advertising, you just pay YouTube every month, and you can watch every YouTube show without advertising. That's all the different platforms are doing that now. Like, if you want to watch anything, you can get a subscription, but then if you want to watch it without advertising, you got to pay a higher subscription rate. So YouTube's the same way. You can see anything for free on YouTube, but you got to sit through the advertising, and you don't want the advertising. You got to pay to not see it. I pay to not see it. But people say, well, Pat, I don't like to watch a show because of advertising. I'm like, well, you either pay to get rid of the advertising, but hey, that's how I make my money. Because if I don't have any advertising, I don't have a show, because that's, something's got to support the show. You patrons do help support the show greatly, but the other side of it is advertising. So anyway, you have no ads. Okay. So I thought that if you joined Patreon for $5 a month, and you were, then when you came to my shows, or even watch my shows, you don't even have to be here live, but you can go to the link I send. You can see the show without the ads. That's what I thought was true. That way, you get a deal for being a patron, right? So anyway, all right. I'm hungry. I'm going to go eat. What is it? 9:00. Okay. All these things small. Anyway, I will see you guys this weekend who are coming. I just again don't know which show I'm doing yet. I have to figure it out, and then we'll have our weekend show. And I'll put out probably 2 more videos on the Gypsy Rose Blanchard, which is very unusual for me. But you know me, I'm not interested in telling just a creepy story, but that I'm concerned about certain issues. And when certain issues bug me, then I do put more videos out than normal. So anyway, I will see you soon, everyone. I do hope. And I'm glad you're all here. You keep me company, and I like that. Bye.